This is Moments of Truth with Andrew Marks, co-founder of Success Hacker. Today, I am really excited to have with me somebody I've known for many years and have a huge deal of respect for. Oh, wait, it's just Bill Cushard, General Manager at ServiceRocket. Bill, tell us a bit about your company and what you're responsible for in your role.
Such a glowing intro, Andrew. I can't even believe it. I'm so glad to be here.
I'm glad you're here, Bill. You know how much respect I have for you. We kid.
Yes, it's mutual for sure. Yeah, I'm Bill from ServiceRocket, and ServiceRocket is in the business of software adoption, and one of our services is LearnDot, and so I'm the general manager of that business unit, and we help software companies develop their customer education programs.
Great. Thanks, Bill. I appreciate you spending some time for me today. Even though I razz you, I respect the hell out of you. So I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, me too.
So, Bill, when companies buy software, they need to help employees learn to use it. What do you think's the next big thing in customer education from your perspective?
I'm glad you asked it that way because just in the last week, I saw a question in a customer education Slack channel.
Yeah.
There's a whole bunch of people that do this, people that work at companies like Slack and Optimizely and all the SaaS companies you can think of. And someone asked this question, and the question more precisely in this case was, we have a pretty good training program. We're covering basically the topics that we need to cover that our customers want, and we're kind of coasting, was the sort of the premise of the question. And this person was asking the group, so what's next? And they used the phrase, what's the next big thing that we should do? And most of us in customer education go right for the product training, and maybe it's more advanced training, or maybe we have to pick another role, or maybe if we've been doing live training, we need to do self-paced training, or the opposite. Maybe we have to add certification. But that's sort of just incremental increases on what you're already doing. And so I tried to steer the conversation in a completely different way by suggesting that the next big thing needs to be for that person to go out and build the school for the function of the people that their software is made for. Right? So forget the product training part of it. And I gave the example of, if you sell graphic design software, maybe you should build an art school, a graphic design art school, right? The next example was more precise, was if you sell project management software, I suggested they acquire the Project Management Institute. I mean, who does more project management training than PMI? Some of your listeners are probably PMI certified. Nobody does more training on project management than PMI. And guess what? Everyone who goes through that certification needs software. So why wouldn't a software company that sells to those people just acquire that whole thing? It's 500,000. PMI has over 500,000 members, right? And $270 million in revenue just from memberships, training, and certifications. So hello, why wouldn't you go into that audience, build that school? So if you don't want to acquire that school, let's say that's a school, build whatever it is for your function, the PMI thing. That's the next big thing.
That's an interesting perspective, and quite frankly, it's something that I like the sound of it. This is what we do.
That's what you guys do.
Yeah, that's
right?
what we do. Yeah, exactly.
And
we're not words, scale of PMI sort of, yet, but
no, but you're sort of creating an industry of skill of a function of a skill, right? I mean,
yep.
Take smaller examples, right? So like say Cisco in the olden days created the CCNA, and they have dozens of them, right? So what happened in that is that they started getting people to take this test or these programs and paying for it. And then people were applying to jobs saying, I have a CCNA. And then hiring managers started to know this. There's this virtuous cycle where, oh, we better put CCNA in our job descriptions. And then the recruiter says, hey, can you go find a CCNA for my new team? So then they start searching for the C. And there is this industry and this credential. And I mean, it's almost to the point, I'm exaggerating a little bit now, but it's almost to the point where who cares about the college degree? I just want to see CCNA. And if I get a CCNA at 7th grade, I'm going to get hired because it became that important. So why not build that school and then educate all these people who will then become your employees, then will become your customers. And there's another virtuous cycle there. You're creating a market of people willing to buy your software because they learn the skill to know how to use it.
Yeah. Now, on the the counter argument to that, though, is should the software vendor be in the business of educating, of owning the education for something that should be at the industry level? It's something that we've talked about as well. It's funny you mentioned Cisco, because when we were first getting going with Success Hacker, we regularly referenced Cisco in their CCNA. Actually, it's a CC. I think it's CCNA, but they also have a CCNP, right? Cisco
There's
Certified
a bunch.
Network Professional and
Yeah.
Cisco Certified Network Administrator. But we looked at that and said, yeah, we want to do something like that.
Uh, yes, and at a slightly smaller scale. I don't know. This is probably in the late 2000s. Now I'm Rackspace in San Antonio, right? So they were one of the first cloud services providers out there that really became successful, and of course they were having trouble finding cloud engineers, right? And so they just made a school. You can look this up. There's VentureBeat articles about this. They created this academy of cloud. They educated people, and many of those people became employees. They hired some of them, right? So this wasn't how do you do Rackspace. This was how can you learn how to run cloud services in a virtualized environment, right? Even at smaller levels, like companies like Cloudera have individual classes like how to do intro to data science. Okay, forget that there's the product involved, but there were people showing up for the 4-day class in Denver at the Marriott and spending $2,000 or $3,000, to go through that class because, the highest paid job in the world at the time, these data science jobs,
data
right?
Science, yeah.
So teach the job, and then of course some of those people became customers. I'm assuming some of those people probably applied for jobs at companies like Cloudera. So you're going beyond your product, and whether that should be owned by a software company or by the industry, I'm like, who cares who owns it? Whoever owns it is the one who, to me, it's like takes the initiative to own it. It's like a strategic move to say we are going to be the ones that teach the world about this thing, right? So, I mean, at the very least, if you're a project management software, I would think the first audience of people you want to talk to are the people who are at PMI, who go to that, take those classes, and show up at the membership meetings. I mean, why wouldn't you sell? They probably advertise to those people. So you could pay to advertise to them and pray they buy from you, or you could just get them in a classroom and you could look them in the eye every day and say, hey, look at me, I'm teaching you how to do a resource plan in your project today, right?
Yeah, and I get it. And I think that's an interesting approach, an interesting perspective, and we can agree to disagree. I always think that
Totally.
do you limit your total addressable market by saying, hey, I'm a project management software company and I'm selling project management software, but I'm also going to I'm going to teach you how to become PMI certified at the same time. Does that prevent somebody from signing up with you because they think, okay, well, this is great, I could become PMI certified, but are these guys going to end up selling to me throughout this training course?
Yeah, I mean, so I have a couple things to say about that. One is, well, even if I just go advertise to another place where they have all these people, most of them aren't going to buy from me anyway. That's just the nature of life, right? Because other software is competing for that same audience, and some people want green buttons and not blue buttons, and so some, just not going to buy from you anyway. But if you are project management incorporated software company, this is a strategic move that you have to decide that you want to do. And so you could say the name of our company's academy and show up to our software company website to learn the stuff. Or you could just build a new identity and say, this is the Project Management Learning Institute. that we're going to build from scratch. And course number one is, our first course on how do you build a resource plan for project management, right? And so you build this identity, and yes, at the bottom, you're going to say, it's owned by the software company. You're not going to hide that. In fact, it's if you go to cmo.com, it's a media property for the chief marketing officers read articles about marketing, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's owned by Adobe. Adobe sells marketing automation software, but you don't know that going. They have decided to build a media property to evangelize and to educate and to inform people about marketing, right? And so, yeah, some people go to that and they still buy HubSpot or Marketo, sure. But some people also go to that and will buy Adobe. But even if they don't buy Adobe, CMO.com is a P&L all by itself with ad revenues and memberships and events and all the revenue models you could imagine. So, I mean, if I'm a software company and I'm looking for customers or I'm looking for a market into which to sell, maybe instead of going to find an existing market and interrupting and going to talk to those people, I could just create a market of those people who will associate something good because they learned from me, they trust me, and so I will be on their list to buy my software. That's how I look at it.
No, I think it's a perfectly viable, realistic perspective.
It's hardcore though. I mean,
it is hardcore.
You can't just like, it's like one thing to do product training. You get your product manager on the phone, you figure out the details, you write up the course, and you do some slides and some recordings. Say, hey, click here to do this, or click there to do. That's doable today, and most of us can visualize that. It is a whole different world to look out beyond that and say, well, how can I teach? I mean, HubSpot did this, right? I mean, a lot of people in my industry know this example, but they created HubSpot Academy. Before this product was even mature, the first training they did was not on the product. It was a certification program called Inbound Marketing. And so I learned how to write a blog, how to do my email newsletters, all the components of inbound marketing. They were, on the one hand, inventing the thing called inbound marketing so that people would say, hey, I want to be an inbound marketer. But they're also teaching people the fundamentals of it. It had nothing to do with the software. I took some of those training courses. They didn't teach me the software in that, but they taught me how to, write a blog post to make it look good, and all the stuff you do in inbound marketing, right? So this stuff isn't necessarily new. People are doing it.
Yeah.
Now the scale to go to the PMI Institute example is like way out there, but why can't you take step one? I don't know.
No, I think it's an interesting idea for sure.
I'll add one more thing.
Sure.
A lot of people would think, well, why? I don't want to charge money for my training. It should be part of who's going to pay for it anyway. Then I go back to the example of New Horizons Learning Center. Most of us have heard of that. Most of us 15 years ago probably took training, but they do nothing but technology training, and they earn $3 billion a year teaching people how to use software.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can't tell me there's no business for people or demand for people to learn how to use technology and software. People are spending with New Horizons $3 billion a year to learn how to do all this stuff. So why isn't the software company doing that? There's lots of reasons why, but I mean, you just open your mind to, why don't we create our own New Horizons?
Yeah, that's interesting. My take on the education is that everybody should be paying for it. They should be paying for it because if you give it to them for free, they don't take it as seriously, right? They've got to put some skin in the game. This was a battle that I've had in the past with sales and alliances teams when we had developed training programs for our partners. They would insist that we give it away for free, and I had an issue. I had an issue with that. You give somebody something for free, they don't value it.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say that because the word free, I think, literally means no value.
Yeah.
It means zero.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. Exactly.
And a lot of education people don't like that argument, because, you know, there's that software as a service argument that, well, it should be part of the software. It's, you know, the service, which is training or support or customer success or whatever those support services functions are, it's part of the service, the second S in SaaS. So how could you possibly pay for it? And I don't even look at it as someone is getting it for free so they don't value it. I look at it from the other side of it is it costs a lot of money to offer a service, whether it's support or training or customers, whatever, you know, just name it. So if you're going to spend money on a team of 4 people and you're going to buy software and you're going to take time, it's going to cost you $1 million in a year to build up a whole team and build all this stuff and then distribute it and figure out a way to market it to tell people, well, who's going to pay for that? If some CFO one day is going to look at that and go, what is this $1 million thing? How come we're not making $1 million, $1.2 million on it? Why aren't we
Right.
selling this?
Right.
I mean, most obvious thing to me is that can't last forever.
No.
You really should ought to pay for yourself if you're in training somehow. I mean, enterprises in general, it's just an example. It's like
almost every company, because we talk to companies all the time about it.
you do.
Talk to somebody about it today because that's our primary business is education. Everybody has some sort of budget
Yeah.
for training.
Yeah. And it's funny, I see this all the time where the software as a service, the cloud company, you know, is selling into the innovators and the visionaries, the early adopters, the Jeffrey Moore technology adoption thing, right? The early adopters. Now, sure, the innovators and the early adopters don't want to buy for training. They don't mind staying up all night and tinkering and going on YouTube and figuring it out because they like it. Well, you get into the later part of that adoption curve, and sorry, those people don't want, they want to go home at 5 o'clock and go to their kid's soccer game. You know, you need to show up in the office. You need to have something and take me through the process of the learning of it so I can do it on my work time. And so these SaaS companies do all of the videos and the self-paced and the help files. And then their first enterprise customer calls and says, okay, so you're going to send someone out for training. And it's deer in the headlights, right? A lot of times you're not ready for that. And then you scramble. I mean, you've noticed, I'm sure you've seen this, like you scramble. Oh my God, we don't have training. You know, you need to segment your customers. In other words, is my point. It's like some are going to want it.
Yeah.
Some are not. You have to, you know, you have to segment. Citibank is different than, I don't know, some individual department at a big company where that just like 3 people download their Jira and for 3 people and they don't need training. But if you roll out Jira to 4,000 employees 2 years later, guess what?
So we have both a B2B and a B2C offering, right? We have online learning.
Yeah.
But we originally developed the content to be instructor led.
Okay.
I've seen in companies, I won't name names, but we have large publicly traded technology companies where one group wanted us to come and do an instructor led training course for one of their teams. Yet another group said, hey, we just want to sign up for the online learning.
See, and I didn't even express it as segmenting to that level. But yeah, just because it's Hewlett Packard or HPE doesn't mean that entire enterprise wants one thing from you. Even within that, there's probably segments. I mean,
well, actually, HP is a customer of ours.
Okay.
Within that segment, their device is a service division, which is about 100 employees. And there's a percentage of those employees that wanted to do instructor-led training, and there was another percentage of employees that were fine with online training. And then there was a percentage of their employees that said, we'll do some of the online training, but we also want to supplement it with a webinar.
Totally.
Right. So it's about being flexible and having lots of options and being flexible enough to offer up what your customer wants. So it's all about having quality content and having lots of ways to deliver it.
Lots of ways to deliver it. And of course you have to, and that's the answer to everything. You have to do all of it. So people ask, should we do e-learning? Should we do live? And the answer is yes.
Exactly.
The problem is it's overwhelming to think we can do all of that today. And so you have to start somewhere. And just like you said, you started with the instructor led. This is counterintuitive to the self-paced, product-led growth SaaS world that thinks everything should be on demand. The problem is when you start off with an on-demand training, and you know this, the level of effort it takes to build the content, the videos, the audios, all that is so high that you're spending weeks and weeks or maybe months before you can even launch something.
It's
Because
for
it just
every
takes
1 hour, for every 1 hour of content, it's somewhere between 30 and 40 hours of development effort.
correct. And the more fancy you want to make your production of your videos, the higher that goes, right?
Yep. Yep.
Naturally. So, and that's not very agile. But if you do an instructor-led training class on Friday, 5 days from now, you could probably do it because you know your product, even if it's not perfect. Now you're getting some feedback cycles from your customers. And you say, oh, I see. They didn't like the way I taught this before that because they didn't get it. So next time I flip it. So now I do second version. Next Friday, I do the same thing. And so now that's what's agile. Ship something to a customer, get some feedback, make a change, do it
Yep.
again, do it again, do it again, do it again. Now, once you've really mastered that, you can take that, build something more permanent, on video. Then you can launch that, right? So the best way, if you really want to be agile, you can't tell me, well, I guess you can. Anybody can do anything.
I
But
can
if you
tell
want
you
to be
whatever I
agile,
want, Bill. I can say whatever I want to you.
yes, you can.
It's
But this
interesting.
is,
It burst. That's how we did it. So I built the education team at Burst, and what we did first is we built and Burst was a cloud BI. So part of it, back to your original point about teaching the skills piece, we actually had to teach people something about data warehousing, right? Because these people who were receiving the training were more business super users. They weren't, IT, analytics experts. So what we did is we spent the first, I think, 9 months building and tweaking and perfecting this live instructor-led training course, this boot camp that we would deliver over a week. And it was only after 9 months after we had launched this thing that we said, okay, now I think we're ready to create an online learning version of this.
Yep. The BI space is a perfect example of the why you should build the school thing or not. I mean, but
Yeah.
it's like, don't look, many of us have used BI tools. And so I go into a good data or a looker. And for the first time you go in there, and I'm not a data person by education anyway. So I look and go, oh, I don't even know where to start. For me to go in there and run a report without even knowing what a schema is or what tables are or where data is located or that I have to connect to a data source, I mean, forget it. I can't even do one report that way. And so think of the thousands of people that are in a similar place. It's not about the software. That's, in some ways, that could be the easy part for a lot of people. But I don't even know the fundamentals. So like if you're back to let's talk about Scrum. There's lots of software made for Scrum. And then there's this thing called the Scrum Alliance. They teach you just Scrum. Okay, well, if you sell me Jira and say, go do Scrum, I just bought Jira. I'm like, if I don't know what a sprint is, if I don't know what an epic is, if I don't know what a story is, Jira's not going to help. So that's kind of my argument for someone like Atlassian could say, we are going to be in the business of teaching Scrum, because if we can teach Scrum, it'll be easier for people to use our software to apply it to Scrum. Now, of course, Atlassian doesn't do that because there's plenty of other opportunities out there.
Right.
But still, I could make the argument that a software company ought to buy Scrum Alliance, right? Scrum.org, all these different certification people, because they're the ones learning the fundamentals it takes just to conceive of knowing what to do with the Jiras or the Smart Sheets or the Rikes or the whatever, right?
Yeah. No,
That's
it
my
makes
position
sense.
on it.
I get it.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah.
All right, Bill. Thanks, man. I appreciate your insight as usual and your perspective, and it's always great to talk to you.
This was a lot of fun. Thank you, Andrew.